normally in improv, you get an entrance song, so I was like, well, this talk is about improv, so let's do that. Nope. Nothing? Nope. All right. It was gonna play Good Vibrations by Marky Mark, so good vibrations, come on, feel it. All right, well, that wasn't exactly how I wanted to start it, but welcome. I love improv comedy. I love it a lot. I think there is a lot to be learned from it. I will try not to hit you guys over the head too much with like, take improv, it's amazing. But take improv, it's amazing. I've never really sort of explicitly combined my work with improv and game development because for a long time, I thought it would make people take me less seriously, which was silly because people already didn't take me seriously at work. And so this talk is not about all of the ways that improv and theater intersect with games. I only have 30 minutes. That's like surprisingly not that much time. It's also not going to be an exhaustive discussion about every single thing you can learn. I've been doing improv for 8 years, and I'm still learning things, and I'm still applying those things to what I do. What this talk is going to be is a discussion of some very actionable lessons that improv can teach us about working collaboratively. And later on, we'll look at some game development processes and talk about how we can approach that in the same way improvisers approach their shows. How many of you guys have ever seen an improv show? Yeah, how many of you guys have seen an improv show that's not Whose Line Is It Anyway? Ah, yes. It's super depressing to work in a field where everybody just knows like this one thing about it, where like, and they're like, oh, it's all like that. And you're like, no, it's absolutely not. It's a lot of it takes place off of Facebook. So pillars of improv. You will see that being funny is actually not up there. It's like not even in the top 10 things that are important about improv, because what's important about improv is that you are going out on stage with people and you don't have a plan. And the only way that you can do that and make it funny and make it so that people will want to come back on stage and to see you is if you can absolutely trust and depend on the people that you're working with. And that only happens with acceptance and trust. So again, acceptance is first because you have to accept what the other people are doing. If they do something and you're like, ugh, worst decision ever, like how can they trust you? They can't trust you. It's super obvious on stage in an improv show. You can see it happening in very real time when that doesn't happen. In game development, it happens a lot slower. So it's not always obvious over like a 6-month or 3-year development cycle if you guys aren't trusting and depending on each other. But boy, you can really see it sometimes when you work with teams that don't do that. I'm gonna show you something, a really, really great example of ultimate support. This is a GIF of the band One Direction. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll be like, oh my God, Hannah, enough. You are 32 years old. But honestly, what this GIF is this is a GIF of one member of One Direction tripping in front of a bunch of cameras and the rest of them immediately tripping with him. Like, no question. And that is what I'm talking about. That level of support of like, if you go down, I go down. That is what I'm talking about. I love that GIF. Okay, so who's heard of Yes and? Yeah. Yes and is awesome, and it's probably the most visible thing to come out of improv. Like, simplistically speaking, yes and is a rule in improv because saying no stops the momentum of a scene. If I'm in a scene with somebody and I say, is that your dog? And they're like, no. It's like, well, great, now I have to ask again. I'm like, is it that guy's dog? And they're like, no. I'm like, is it that lady's dog? Like, is the dog sentient? Like, does it have no master? Like, and it's just me, like, going back and forth. But if I say, is that your dog? And you say, yes, well, great. Like, now we're sort of like, we can move on, but we still don't have any momentum. So the yes lets you move on, and it's the and that gives you momentum. So if you say, like, yes, it's my dog, and it's pooping on your shoe, and I'm not sorry, like, then we're getting somewhere, right? We have a scene. thing is a lot of people try to pretend like yes and is just this thing that we can all use in everyday life. Like be more positive, be more there, and be more present. But it's really not that simple. And I will tell you why. We'll let you in on a little secret. Yes and is not a pillar of improv. Remember before we had the pillar of improv, yes and wasn't there? Yes and is a very, very good training tool. We use yes and when people start improv because when they start improv, they are coming from a place of fear and vulnerability, and no is a very easy response because it's essentially like if I have a ball and I throw it to you and you're nervous that you don't know what to do with that ball, you're like, no, somebody else has to pick it up. Because once you get that ball and you're like, oh my God, now I'm responsible for throwing it. What if I hit someone in the head? Like, what if I look stupid? What if it like lands over there and everybody laughs at me? So no is this thing that people say because they're afraid and they're afraid of being vulnerable. So we take that away. We're just like, nope, you don't get to say no. You have to say yes, and then you have to say and. So not only do you not get to be afraid, but you have to add things on your own. So when we're making games, it's not that no isn't a legitimate answer. No is very often a legitimate answer. I'm a producer. No is a great answer. But it's important to acknowledge why we're saying no. Like, are we saying no because no is legitimately the right answer? Or are we saying no because we're afraid and we're nervous and we're not sure what comes if we say yes? There are a lot of things that are really scary about making games. Like maybe you've made a game before and it turned out really bad and you're nervous that's gonna happen again. Or maybe you're working with people who are a lot more experienced than you and you think they're a lot smarter than you and you don't wanna look stupid. Or maybe you're working with people who have totally different disciplines than you that you don't really understand and you're like, oh my God, I don't wanna say the wrong thing because they'll know I don't know how they do their job. It's especially true when you're just starting out. When I started out as a producer, like every time I talked to the programmers, I was like, so you guys, you're doing work today, huh? That's great, cool. Like, and I was just like so afraid. I was like, if I say too much, like they will immediately know that I don't know what I'm talking about. But they already knew I didn't know what I was talking about. I'm a producer. I don't know what programmers do. I mean, I know a lot more about it now. Oh, thank you. So fortunately, just like yes and can be a training tool for improvisers, we can use yes and as a training tool for ourselves and the way that we interact with other people. So there are 2 ways to do that, and I'm gonna tell you the first way, and it's super intense, and you're all gonna be like, that's silly, no one would say that. But the first way is to literally say yes and to things. So if people come to you with a question or a conversation, and your first reaction is to be like, no, that's a terrible idea. No, that won't work. No, I don't want to do that. Like, stop yourself and actually say yes. And then figure out what you want to say yes to. And sometimes the yes is as small as just acknowledging what they've said. Like, yes, I hear that. Yes, you want to do that. Like, it seems so silly, but like, the way we communicate with people is important, and if you are positively acknowledging what they're saying to you, that goes a long way, and it certainly goes a long way past immediately shutting them down. So like, excuse me. For instance, I once, this is a true story, like 2 days before Code Freeze had a designer come to me and was like, I have this new skill, I want to put it in. And I was like, what? We lock in 2 days. And they were like, oh, but this skill is really good. And what I said at the time was, no, you know that's not gonna happen, go away. But then after that conversation, I didn't know anything more about the skill. I made him feel bad. Like it's 2 days before Code Freeze, everyone's stressed out, and he's over at his desk being like, ugh, Hannah's mad at me, like, gosh, what a jerk. What I should have said was, yes, I hear that you want to put this skill in the game, and I want to hear more about why you think it's so important. I want to hear more about what it is. And the truth is like, there was a legitimate problem that this skill was solving, and I didn't hear about it because I shut him down right away because no was such an immediate answer. So I feel like you guys are like looking at me like, that's crazy, Hannah. You can't just say yes to things. So I promised Boston Fig I would make this panel interactive. So if anyone has a question that they think I cannot answer yes to, I would like you to ask it to me right now. Why? That's not a question.
Are you a dog?
Yes. I believe that all of us have a certain animal instinct inside of us. Yes, I am concerned about your financial stability, and if you want to talk about some saving plans, let's absolutely do that later.
Why is 2 + 2 = 5?
Okay, so why is not... yes. Yes, math is often an art as much as it is a science. All right, that was fun. I didn't do that last time. I was like, oh, and that was a mistake. So saying yes is, we're moving on, sorry, I didn't. Saying yes is the first part, and is the second part, and the important thing about is really asking yourself, like, what can I add to this conversation? Like, I have just, like, tried to not shut this person down, but, like, what can I add? What am I bringing to this situation? And then if you figure out that, like, the answer is nothing, like I have nothing to add, like that's a good thing to know too. Especially as a producer, because so many times people come to you with questions that you don't immediately know the answer to, that you're not sure what to do. And can be as simple as like, and I will figure that out by 2 p.m., because always set deadlines for yourself. And I will make sure that the right person talks to you after lunch, or and don't forget about your upcoming milestones. So that's very important. Again, this advice is applicable to everyone, but if there are any producers or aspiring producers, this is really important for you, because as a producer, your entire job is to make sure that you maintain momentum. And saying yes and is the simplest way to making sure every interaction you have has momentum and you're not stopping anything in its tracks. So that was the first approach, the super ridiculous, say yes to everything approach. The second is the minute you get the urge to say no to something, stop and just ask questions. Just ask for more information. Just keep pestering this person for questions. The designer that I was mentioning earlier, if I had just stopped and just be like, what is this skill? Like, what's so exciting about it? Why do you want to put it in? I actually would have solved a problem like way ahead of when I ended up solving it. The worst thing that happens there is you have a little bit more information than you had at the beginning. And again, like, honestly, by the third question, most people will be like, cool, I got my answer, I gotta go. It's true, people don't like answering questions. So if you are working collaboratively, and especially if you're working collaboratively with a new team, I really encourage you to treat your early brainstorming sessions and your early development like you would an improv scene. Really support each other. This is a time when a lot of people are having ideas and they're nervous about them. They're nervous they're gonna get shot down. Support each other, build on each other's ideas instead of critiquing them or second guessing them. There will always be time to edit things later. Really surprising and interesting things will come to you once you develop what we call group mind. And that's when you come into a group and you're so supportive of each other that you end up like literally coming up with the ideas together. It's really neat when it happens. I highly recommend if you're if you're doing sort of these like early writing and brainstorming sessions with each other, look up some improv exercises online, like even just like simple word association stuff to do with each other. It's a really good sort of like way to bring down each other's barriers and like really easy things to say yes to because they don't have consequences. You're just like, potatoes, yes, potatoes are amazing, like, and then you move on. But you're already like excited about saying yes, and you're sort of used to it. If you don't know any improv exercises, email me. I'll put my email thing up at the end. I will send you a million. Again, conflict and momentum. There's nothing wrong with conflict. Game development is rife with it. You are always going to be disagreeing with each other, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having difference of opinions, but it slows things down, and that is true of development, and it's also true of narratives. I'm a big believer in sort of like saying yes and within sort of scenes. Has anyone ever seen the movie Bug? I always talk about this because it's the best example of yes and heightening in a movie. So Bug is this like really, really weird sort of horror movie with Ashley Judd where she thinks that the government is spying on her with robotic cockroaches. And this guy comes into her apartment and she's like, and like there's like tinfoil everywhere and he's like, what's all this about? And she's like, oh my God, the government is spying on me with robotic cockroaches. And he goes, like, and you think, like, you're like, oh, I know what's gonna happen. And he goes, oh my God, that explains why my radio's always cutting in and out. And then he just like adds, and that's like the first 15 minutes of the movie. And so like, conflict is great, but like just remember that like sometimes conflict can really slow down momentum of a game or a scene. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the rule of threes. Do you guys know about the rule of threes? Ooh, okay, I love getting to tell people about things. The rule of threes is really simple. It's the idea in comedy that things are funnier in threes. A lot of it is because 3 is the smallest number of things, or of things in a pattern. So it's the easiest way to set up a pattern, or set a pattern, what is it? Yeah, introduce a pattern, set a pattern, and break a pattern. So you can sort of exploit that quickly to subvert expectations on that third point. It's also a very satisfying number for the human brain. Like the human brain can just grasp the number 3 very easily. Whether or not that's because we sort of generally, like we're biologically, I don't know, inclined to do so, or culturally 3 is like this number that we have just dealt with for a long time. There's just like a million things, like 3 Billy Goats Gruff. I'm trying to think of other things that come in 3s. Goldilocks, yep. Toothpicks? 3 Little Pigs. It's a really good number for collectibles. Like, I might be alone in this, but it drives me, I love Donkey Kong Country, but collecting 4 things infuriates me. I'm like, are you serious? Just because it's like spelled correctly? Like, and I have never once made it a point to collect everything, like all 4 of those letters in that game, because 3 and multiples of 3 are just much more satisfying. That also goes for multiples of 3. And I'm gonna show you my favorite example of that, which is also from my favorite video game. Oh, is the sound gonna work? Nope. Oh. Come on. Nope. Ugh, you guys. It's that really great scene in Mass Effect 3 where Shepard keeps pushing the button and the Solarian is yelling at her. It's really funny. And you can press it exactly 12 times, and on the 12th time comes the punchline, and it's really good and satisfying. So just remember that. 3 is also the number of times you typically have to hit a boss. Like that's not by accident. So, guys, I'm really sad about that video. Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about story structures. This is a thing called the 7-line story. It's a game that we make improv students play. And one of the reasons we play it is because it's a very good sort of like basic story outline. But the other reason is that every student only gets to say one line of this. And you go down, and then, so that's all you get. You just get that one line, and in the end, you have the 7-line story that you all made together. And that's because when improv students start out, they feel very personally responsible for making sure every scene is funny. And they're like, I have to make sure that every scene is good and funny. And actually, that is like antithetical to making sure every scene is good and funny. You have to work together, and you have to trust each other, and you have to be willing to put in a small amount of work into a bigger picture. Again, just like games. No. So I love playing this game and just like playing it with every single movie that's ever been made. It's very satisfying. I know that there's at least one indie studio in Boston as well that uses this exercise when they're working on games. I'm not going to tell you which one, but it exists. I made this too. So one of the things that I wanted to do to sort of put my money where my mouth is, and I forgot to get a pen out before, is that we are all gonna write, we're gonna write a little story right now. Did somebody say yes? Because that's exactly the reaction. We're gonna write a story, yes! Cool, okay. So let's just practice really quick before I start writing down. Okay, so once upon a time, somebody raise their hand, wanna, right there.
There was a princess.
Once upon a time, there was a princess. I like this. And every day she wore frilly things. I mean, I like that too. Awesome.
Until one day, a shooting star hit the castle.
Okay, until one day a shooting star hit the castle. Into it. Yeah. Oh no. Okay, and because of that?
She went to the Salvation Army.
Okay.
Because she took over her dad's job.
Until finally? Yup. And ever since then, come on. Oh, you guys, that was even more fun than I'd hoped it could be. Okay, so now, all right, that was awesome. We're gonna do it again. Let's start, okay, once upon a time. There was a turtle, okay. Now I'm gonna write this down because I don't wanna forget. There was a turtle, okay.
Every day it grows.
I mean, turtle's got a turtle, you know? Until one day.
It realized the drugs were slowing it down even more.
Oh. Okay, and because of that? And because of that?
He went into debt.
Until finally?
The bill collectors kept calling.
Yep. And ever since then,
Now he works at the Shell station.
okay, so I am going to make a game out of that. I was like, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna tell a story, and then I was like, what's the point of just like telling a story altogether if we're not gonna make a game? And if anyone else wants to make a game from that same story, you absolutely should, and then we can collect them all together. And I'm gonna put so many turtle puns in this game because that is part of the process. That was really fun. Thanks for doing that with me. Cool. So since I have now agreed to make a video game, I thought that we would talk a little bit about production cycles and development schedules and all that fun stuff. So here's the thing that I feel like about how, oh my God, I'm running so far behind. Okay, it's fine. About how we structure development. We have a sort of very standard production cycle. You do like pre-production, production, post-production, beta, alpha, bug fixing. Sometimes you'll do other things. And one of the hardest things sort of as a producer is getting people to really emotionally commit to transitions within that schedule, and to, transitions within that schedule, and also like, especially if you're working on a live game, like moving on from like one release to another. So it's difficult to get people to transition. The other thing that's sort of difficult is getting people to understand like the why of like, why do we do this now versus later? Like what are we really doing? Why are we focusing on this? It tends to be like the why is something that like producers really care about and development directors, and that designers and programmers and artists kind of don't. So I was like, okay, if I were gonna make my own development schedule and my own sort of like cycle for how to develop a video game, like what would I do? So I based it on my favorite improv structure of all time, which is called the Herald. And the Herald is great. It is like as close to sort of a traditional structure as we have. And so you can kind of see up there, you start with an opening game. The opening game is basically idea generation, brainstorming, all that stuff. I was on a team once where like everybody left voicemails, and that was where we got the idea. The point of the game is that you come up with as much information that will serve as the genesis for the show. Then you do 3 scenes inspired by that opening game. The point of those scenes is, again, relationships that are clear and understood by the audience. Then you have a group game where you come back and you... can you guys like read that? Yeah, that's fine. Two bottles of water. I'm really going for it. So you do. Okay. So the group game is where you restate the theme that has emerged during those first 3 scenes. And the scene is basically the group looking at each other and saying, like, this is the theme. And you might also be solidifying the theme depending on how the first beat has gone. You go into the second beat of scenes, and you have 3 scenes to draw from that you've agreed upon, and you have a theme. So the next 3 scenes are basically iterations of those first 3. And then you have, these are just repeats of my last page of notes. That's fine. You have another group game where you restate the theme, and then you have a third beat where everything gets mixed up. Characters from the first beat meet characters from the second beat. The theme is restated. It is very exciting and crazy. So I put together, this is my idea for an improv structure. Or no, game development structure. And it's the same thing. So you start with idea generation. If you work for a big publisher, maybe you get your ideas just handed to you. But hopefully this is an indie game festival, so you just come up with your ideas. The first beat, you come up with sort of the pillars of your game. Depending on sort of what your budget and your schedule is like, you might have 1, you might have 6, whatever. Then you have sort of a solidified time where you come back and you restate your goal and your theme. So like, for example, one of the pillars might be like a robust advancement system. So you restate the theme, then you come and you build out your features. Yeah, the features are just iterations on the pillars. Like, if you're bringing something new in during that second beat, you are not doing a good job. So if you've built, say one of the pillars is an advancement system. When you get to the second beat, you might build 2 features like a loot system or a character advancement system. Those aren't new, again, they're just specific iterations on the pillars from the first beat. Once you've built all the characters and all the levels and all the systems, you regroup again and restate your theme. Again, I really feel like it's really important to put this in your schedule. Things can get so crazy depending on how big your team is. Even if it's just you get really head down. It's important to put in your schedule, like stopping and saying, like, what is our game? What are we building? What is the goal? So I feel like it's really important, especially sometimes your teams can be kind of siloed depending on how they're structured, and then it becomes even more important. Then it comes to the third beat, and I think, again, this is sort of a part that really gets cut short. For one reason or another, maybe you took too long. Thank you. Maybe you ran out of time. But it's too bad, because I think this is like really where it gets sort of very satisfying and interesting. The features that you've built are done, but this is where they get a chance to sort of blossom. And once you've seen them complete and in context, you can kind of look at them against each other and figure out, like, maybe things grow out of those things being together. I don't know, it's exciting. Your environments, your characters, your UI, your systems, you bring them all together and discover all the ways that they can interact. Maybe some of those interactions were planned, but I really think that there will be ones that don't show themselves until this point in development, which is why I think it is very important to have this as a distinct segment in your timeline. So since it's based on an improv format called the Herald, I gave it a name.
Yeah.
Yep. Again, I did that because the Herald is something that I have studied for years, and I think it's great. You guys might not know it as well, but I think that there are a lot of universal patterns and structures to the stories that we tell, and I feel like those could also be really great ways to sort of create games. Do you guys know about the hero's journey? Yeah, so the hero's journey is, it's also called the monomyth. It's a narrative pattern identified by Joseph Campbell. Some exciting monomyths include The Hobbit, Spider-Man, like pretty much all sort of like fantasy, things like that. They start with a person living an ordinary life, and then they get a supernatural call to adventure, and they're like, no, I don't want it. And they're like, oh, okay, I guess I want it. The thing that's nice about this is that like things that are like built in, like mentors and helpers. So like I just threw some ideas on here of like where the part that is really real is atonement as bug fixing. Yeah, you're like, I'm sorry I built this. There's also the 3-act structure, which is present in basically every movie that has ever been made. It's crazy how prevalent it is, and like I almost don't ever want to tell people about it, because once you learn about it, you're like, oh, I know what's going to happen. He's going to hit the lowest point, and that's where Act 3 starts. Again, I didn't even add anything to this, because to me, this is a game development. Beginning, inciting incident, second thoughts, obstacle, 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 disaster, crisis. I'm running out of time, so the only thing that I will say is that I think the Act 3 of movies always starts with characters at their lowest point. And to me, lowest point is always like feature lock. Yeah, it's like where you're like, oh, what we have in here right now is all that's ever gonna be in there. Like, we're done. Now we just have to bug fix. And that's a really hard point, and like, it's important to remember how hard that is for yourself and your team. There's that. Again, story of the game. Great, thank you guys so much.
Round of applause.